Still have some people logging in, but Thursday we had a great LTAD chat. We had Andy Ryland from USA Football on describing the football development model, and then we had truly a legendary coach, numerous state championships, several collegiate players, but it's not the wins and losses, his state championships that were impressive. It was his discussion of how he develops young people from a psychosocial, emotional, and character development standpoint. It was incredibly powerful. So if you have the chance, put that one in the queue and listen or watch it. I think when we really get into that topic, it's like at the 37-minute mark. But yeah, Coach K does an incredibly powerful message in that LTAD chat. So with that, let's get started for today. Welcome everybody. We have a nice crowd today. I'm Joe Eisman. I'll be moderating today's LTAD chat live. We've been off to a really good start. I just explained Thursday's session. I'm losing track. I think this is 6 or 7 in the last month. And it's really a no-frills grassroots town hall forum, which grew out of our LTAD chat on Twitter. And then the LTAD playground workshop co-hosted by myself, my colleague Rick Howard, who is the technical engineer for LTAD Chat Live, and Tony Moreno. We work together very closely with the National Strength and Conditioning Association's LTAD Special Interest Group. So today we have 2 of our guests, Erica Suter and Krista Stoker, who are frequent participants in the LTAD chat Twitter chats, and they've also attended the LTAD playground, which I mentioned. And the LTAD playground is actually going to be the topic of the LTAD chat in a couple of weeks, May 9th, where Rick, Tony, and myself kind of explain the origins of it, what we do at that event, and some of the things that we're doing right now and some future directions that we have planned with it as well at the national and local level. Our other guest is Ivy Casagrande, and they are going to discuss and share advice and experiences on coaching youth and teenage females. I chose this topic because it really seems we get to be so male-centric in our discussions of youth athletic development. And in the coaching ranks, we have a majority of male coaches who often exhibit hypermasculinity. I've often said one fix to youth sports and some of the issues that we have is to have more female coaches of male teams. And as a male coach myself, and one who has primarily worked with male athletes, I'll admit that I find it challenging to coach female athletes, and I'll admit that it's a bit uncomfortable for me as well. And I think there's probably others out there who have the same feelings and aren't confident and competent in terms of coaching youth females. So it's great to have these 3 guests on today to share, again, their experiences and insights into this topic. I'm going to drop in the chat box a course that was developed by the USOC and the Aspen Institutes of Sport Project Play on how to coach kids. It's specific to coaching girls. So I'll drop that in the chat box as we go along here. And as always, this is an open forum, and I'll start with some Q&A that I've generated myself, but we highly encourage everybody to use the chat box to pose questions. And also, as we go along today, if you feel the need to jump in and kind of respectfully provide your insight and experience on this topic, that would be great as well. So I'm going to let Ivy, Krista, and Erica kind of introduce themselves and kind of give us a 30-second to 2-minute elevator ride introduction, if you will.
Eric, you want to start?
Sure. Hi guys, I'm so honored to be here. Joe, thank you. I know we met at the first ever LTAD playground a couple years back. So to see the trajectory of all this and the audience and the movement behind it has been amazing. So thank you guys for having me. I'm Erica Suter, and I am a youth strength and conditioning coach in Baltimore, Maryland. I mainly work with soccer athletes, starting at the elementary level and going all the way up until college. But most of my college players now had started with me when they were 8 to 10 years old. So I'm a huge LTAD girl, and it's been amazing and honoring for me to see these kids blossom and really go under that long-term model. So I'm grateful to be here, and I'm grateful to be with Kristin and Ivy on this panel.
I can jump in. I'm Krista Stoker. I run a softball player development business called S2 Breakthrough, and I also oversee a travel organization for softball. We do things quite differently. We built out a curriculum and different things to focus on not just a year-to-year approach, but really taking the athlete through their whole journey. And so there's not a lot of inspiration to come up with something like that in the softball community because it doesn't exist. So we started getting into the LTAD community and some things with Joe, and went to the LTAD playground for inspiration, and have really had to dive into a lot of different avenues to get some knowledge and inspiration for our model. So I'm super pumped about this topic because I often, when I jumped on these calls, notice that I'm one of the only females. And so I'm excited to talk specifically about some of the challenges that our female athletes face.
Awesome. My name is Evie, and I'm really honored to be with you guys here. And I'm currently the strength conditioning coach for Orlando Pride of the NWSL. But long-term athletic development has been a really big passion of mine. I came across starting, I think it was in 2014, when I met Desmond Ryan from Arsenal, the academy system there, and I got the chance to go there and learn from them, and was completely in love with the process and how they did things, and started diving into a lot of work with Sean Cummins, Joe, all those amazing people, and met Erica, and started this whole journey of helping youth athletes to develop, and started with coaching kids at parks to working for Redline Athletics, which is a youth athletic performance in the U.S. and Michigan for about 2 years, and working with the U.S. youth national team as a sports scientist. And it's been quite a journey. It's just amazing to learn every day from people like you guys, and really excited to dive in more and open those discussions with all of you.
Good, thanks for a little bit of background there. Now, I know that in our private conversations leading up to the show here, we said that we were going to go way beyond ACL injury prevention, because that seems to always be the topic when we talk about coaching female athletes, right? And we are definitely going to do that, but let's start at least with some thoughts and words about physically training young girls. Let's do some key things that everybody should know and or do when they physically train young female athletes. So if we just can go maybe one by one, and I'm sure that's also going to spawn maybe some back and forth between you as well. We'll just kind of just keep this as an organic discussion amongst the three of you in terms of key considerations for physically. Let's leave the psychosocial, emotional part for the second part of the show, but let's just talk about physical considerations of training young females.
Yeah, I'll start it off, and there's a lot of anatomical considerations, but for me as a coach, I've learned that I don't train them that much differently than male athletes. Like, we're all still working on total body strength, being able to pump the brakes and decelerate in a way where they're not going to put strain on their knee and blow it out. So we're just really mastering the basics. Of course, I take all of my athletes through an assessment, and I've noticed just with females, there's a lot of weakness in the glutes and the hamstrings and sometimes even the quads. So there's a lot of patellar issues to take a look at. I've found a lot of overuse in the knee joint as well. But even when I write my programs, I found that it was very similar to my male athletes. And I always find it defeatist when coaches say to female athletes, well, you guys just have wider hips. And I don't like to say that phrase with them. I just like to tell them, hey, you are also an athlete, and here's what you can specifically work on yourself, because it's going to be different for everyone. And this is how I'm going to get you ready to step on the field and to play your sport at your best and to be your fastest and your strongest. And I like with the female athlete to really show them that there's a lot of things we can control in their training, and I rather don't want to focus on the anatomy because that's something we can't really control, but everything else like muscle strengthening, being able to decelerate and control your body and stabilize your core and your lumbopelvic hip region, like all that stuff is what I want them to focus on, because that's all in our control in the gym.
Yeah, that was great. I think, Erica, I kind of going to add to what you said. I think definitely there's a kind of similar value of training females and males. I think that the biggest thing that I've came across, especially when I was at Redline, there's the kids, just lack of interaction, lack of playing outside. So you come with kids coming to you that don't really know how to move, how to be creative in that expression of movement. So as a youth coach, I think you should definitely be able to balance it out, the stress components and all that, but also what is the fine line between those two, and also giving them the expression of movement, because they don't do that as much, and they don't play outside, they don't play with their friends anymore. So as coaches, I think our roles are so much important now with all that's going on, that I think it's when to speed up and when to slow down. So I think that's huge. You don't want to slow young kids down too much because they need to express their movement. But again, you need to slow them down, especially when they go through the growth maturation process, and girls would do that earlier. That's the time to really dedicate to motor control. And I think that's a big thing that I've done. It's kind of like, okay, we need to slow them down in the weight room and kind of guide them through that. But at the same time, allow them to be creative and allow them to kind of be a kid. So I think that's the biggest thing that the balance that we kind of need to find as a youth coach, and for females and for males. But I found it too with females, with the pressure of parents and being early in the growth and maturation process, and some of those qualities that come into that, it's more fat mass compared to boys they're stronger and faster. The females is kind of the contrary, like it goes, they're increasing the body fat mass, and that comes with all the psychological aspects. So as a coach, you really need to kind of dive into that aspect and say, okay, make the athlete part of the process and kind of guide them through outside of that crazy pressure, and say, okay, we actually can use this time to really focus on your motor control, can use that to do all that strength program that we're going to make you a resilient player and athlete throughout your career, especially during those times. So I think really important points to kind of take into consideration the growth maturation aspect, especially.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's nicely builds into what I was going to bring up. So I don't have the expertise in strength and conditioning that Evie and Erica do. We in-house, but one of the things that we started noticing this year, we implemented assessments for all of our athletes, and part of the assessment was a questionnaire, and it asked when they had their first period and sort of about regularity. We hadn't asked that question of everyone before, and we really had started asking that question because we wanted to separate our training between pre-puberty and post-puberty. So that was why we initially had begun to ask that question. And as we got the answers, I think we have been very surprised, both in the fact that maybe not as surprising for all of us here for LTAD, that, you know, some girls that were feeling a lot of pressure hadn't even hit puberty yet, and we're pushing them along and sort of like rushing that process for them. But we had a lot of older athletes and on some of our, you know, older teams that were not having regular cycles, that were missing, you know, 6 to 9 months of periods. And I don't think we had ever really considered that, because we don't coach something like running or something that seems like it's more common. And so I think that periods and cycles are something that are obviously harder for our male coaches to talk to the athletes about, but we can't shy away from it. It's something that is going to happen their whole lives. And it's really an important conversation of what is regular, what needs to be happening, what is pointing to training, what is pointing to nutrition, when does it get sort of beyond our scope. And so I think that is a difference that we have to address, and have to get all of the coaches that are training these athletes comfortable sort of destigmatizing the conversation around that.
Yeah, good stuff. So strength training was brought up a few times, and I think one thing that everybody on the call has had to deal with at one point in time is, how do you create buy-in for young female athletes? Because we know all of the misnomers, right? So what are some strategies that you use in creating buy-in to strength training, and maybe more specifically, once they become movement competent, heavy strength training?
Yeah, I'll start this one off. One thing I like to do is meet the girls where they are. So if they're walking into the weight room for the first time, I have to be aware of that as a coach. And instead of having them dive right in, I like to ask them questions and get to know them. So that's going to come with the emotional part of it too. And that's something we'll touch on later. But just asking them what their goals are as far as being an athlete, what specifically do they want to work on. So a lot of girls say they want to work on speed development and their conditioning, and I tell them why adding in the strength and working on healthy movement is going to allow them to sprint with better posture, or to be able to drive their knees higher, or to have more of an aggressive arm swing. So being able to work on their upper body strength. So really just starting the conversation with asking them questions, and also just taking it slow. So the last thing I want to do is just dive right into a full program. As one example, I had a girl who was big into yoga. So what we do is half the workout, do some yoga, and then slowly start to introduce some strength movements, and some new things for her. So not totally Xing out what she was doing before, but just trying to meet her where she was. And then over time, she got more comfortable with the weight room and started to see the results. And then as far as that, girls do like to see that they're getting better. So whether that's quantitative feedback, we're tracking speed weekly and checking in on trajectory of time improvements. We're tracking gradual progression in load. We're doing qualitative feedback. So I'm taking a lot of slow motion videos and showing them, hey, like, you see how when you came into the building this time and you were changing direction, your knee was kind of coming in here and it was unstable. Now look at this. Now look at how efficient this is. Now look how your knee is not in danger anymore. And then they can see that. So I like to give them both the qualitative and the quantitative feedback, because girls, they're athletes. They thrive on results and setting goals and seeing that they're improving. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's funny because we build just put out there that we don't have an issue where our girls worry about load. The culture is, it's celebrated to be strong and lift. And so our high school age athletes, maybe once we're starting to load a little heavier, when they're hitting a PR, whatever it is, they'll get around each other just like you would sort of stereotypically see posted a lot of times of male athletes. And I don't think we have that struggle because of the culture we've built, and they're just, as Erica said, they're athletes, they're competitive. I mean, they want, if their teammates are doing that and that's what they want to do, they're going to want to do that too. So I would just say celebrate it. The reason it's maybe more natural for male athletes to want to load than want to gain weight or whatever it is because that's been celebrated a long time for them as athletes. And so for female athletes, just celebrate when they're loading, when they're doing whatever it is. I think, what a bigger issue that we have faced is just gaining weight. The conversation around trying to have some of our teenage athletes and females gain weight. They need to gain weight. They need to put on mass. And my experience when we're working with male athletes is that we feel it's a lot easier just to be straight up. You need to put on, 35 pounds to do this. And the female athletes, that's because of the, what they think that means to them and sort of the stereotypes that our society has placed. That's a little bit more of a delicate conversation. But if you show them what that means and the gains they could make and tie it to performance, I think that's a positive about females playing athletes, is that their body starts being seen as something that gets performance instead of something, that's being judged or whatever it is. So I think for us, lifting heavy hasn't been an issue because it's our culture. I think it's more challenging to talk about putting on mass, which most of our girls, once they get to the competitive level, need to start having a similar conversation to male athletes about that.
Yeah, those are all very good points. I think I try to learn and kind of listen to them a lot. And I think creating a safe space is a huge thing for youth, especially I've heard so many stories of my athletes, like when they come back from school, all those like drama when they are going through middle school, high school, and all that. So kind of I think it's just huge to understand their environment so we can better prioritize things. So I would say give them as much resources as possible. I'm going to say, especially in this quarantine, in this lockdown, that's our opportunity as coaches to provide all our athletes and youth and the female athletes with all those resources that they can have, because now they have the time to focus on those things. Because when we are living life as normal, as the old normal, it's just too busy, right? They go to school, they have homework, they go to train, they play sports, all that. So the resource part is really, really important as female athletes, especially. Now is the time to kind of give them resources about the menstrual cycle. I always use the app, the Fit Our Women app, which is an amazing resource for all of females. It's Fit Our Women, and I can write down later. But it gives a really huge education component to it of, okay, you're in this part of your cycle, then this is the nutrition that you should be kind of prioritizing. This is what the physiology of it, and athletes like that part. They like to understand what our training is going to get to them and how we do it. So I think, like Erica said, I think the feedback, it's huge. It's really important, and not kind of focus on one specific thing. Like even if their goals are to, I don't know, if they have I had a kid, a young athlete, a young female that came to me that with really chronic low back. She was a volleyball player. Not isolating the problem and kind of using that to educate them on what things are happening everywhere where the problem is starting. Visual feedback for me, it's huge. Kind of using the before and after, the little things, the little improvements that are going to get them to like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is actually really good. And this all helps them to succeed in that environment and use you as a resource to create that safe place where they normally don't get when they are in on school, on their team, all that stuff. So I think the resources are huge. Just kind of, okay, this is mobility. This is the website that you can go for mobility. I use Kelly Starrett. There's the Ready State app, which for me is really good stuff to kind of educate athletes that the mobility part is important, but not only that, the time to breathe. Can you teach your athletes how to breathe? Even like as young kids, like they need that. If you're the person that kind of teach them at an early young age, imagine when they get to the college level where there's more stress and they have all those tools that they can use because you guide them through it. So this is all part of creating that buy-in. And I think seeing every opportunity as an opportunity to educate your athletes, I think it's huge. It goes way more than the physical aspect.
Yeah, good stuff. So yeah, before we move on past the physical, I want to take a question from somebody on the call today, Rihanna. Erica, you mentioned speed and agility assessments. Evie, and sorry that I mispronounced your name at the onset. You've talked about growth and maturation, and Krista has talked about AJAT menarche. So the question is, what assessments are you using for monitoring growth and maturation, and how often are you assessing?
I can start. We assess when athletes first start with us. We start an assessment. We're in the process of splitting that up a little bit more. We had been using just one assessment for all of our athletes, and it seems a little much and not targeted at the right things for some of our younger pre-puberty athletes. So it's the reason it starts with every every assessment starts with a wellness questionnaire and a sort of like medical history. We have an athletic trainer and biomechanist on staff. She's the one that goes through that with them. So we record any medical history we need, but that is where we get the information about their cycle and where they are in the maturation process. And when we weigh and do a measurement of height. So regularly what we had been doing was about every 12 weeks doing reassessments. It's not the full assessment that we do at the beginning, but a sort of mini version of that. I think what we're trying to figure out a little better is what that should look like for our pre-puberty athletes, and probably not doing as much formal assessments, but doing just stuff that we monitor in their classes, and just monitoring height and weight to see if we can see any tendency towards growth. We developed our own assessment. So it's a combination of a lot of things. It's a combination of like a functional movement screen, some of the MyTPI stuff, which is for rotational athletes, for our older athletes. And it combines a lot of different things for that. We also do passive range of motion, active range of motion for targeted training. So that's what ours looks like. And I think we can do a better job with, and that's sort of one of the things we're working on, of what that looks like ongoing. How we track things like ongoing questions about things like cycles. All of our athletes, when they train, the very first thing they do is fill out a survey. Just like, how are you feeling? What was your sleep like? Nutrition. There's a like sliding scale. And so that asks about cycle and different things like that, just to start letting us track things, and then also giving them education around things, so that as if we see a decline around certain periods, we can start to educate them on understanding why something like that might happen. So they get a questionnaire every day, which helps us track those types of things as well.
Yeah, I'd expound off of what Krista mentioned with the younger ages, so 6th and 7th graders, looking more at just general movement patterns. So let's just try to keep it at the basics and just look at those movement patterns with the coach's eye over time. So right now, obviously can't see them in person. So a lot of video feedback, and even when we are in the gym, saving videos and just looking at over many years. So we're looking at movement patterns, like getting down into proper athletic stance, being able to decelerate. Sometimes with our 7th graders, we'll turn that into decelerate and then like a mini vertical jump and stick. So they might not have the strength at that point to do like a powerful jump. So just really working on the first movement of that the counter movement. And then your strength patterns like squats. So just body weight squat to a box, crawling for time, keeping a cone on their back, just making sure that they have the body weight against their own body weight resistance or the body weight strength, and to be able to stabilize their cores and how long they can keep that cone on their back. Different lunge patterns, so forward low lunging so that they're getting in an uncomfortable position where we can really check out the mobility in their hips. And then just upper body strength. So looking at pushing, we usually start our 6th and 7th graders with their hands elevated on a bench or a box, and then being able to do a hang from the monkey bars in our gym for time. Sometimes it's nice to see them get competitive with that. I think the younger ages do like to see those numbers too at times. And then moving into our high schoolers, looking at 10-yard, 20-yard, 30-yard, 40-yard times, and then powerful vertical jumps for height. So we're measuring all of that, and then also looking at horizontal power. So just one broad jump and stick, and then working on muscle elasticity and doing 3 broad jumps in a row, and then sticking that 3rd one. So we're looking at a lot of different things. But I would just say for the high school ages, we're definitely tracking data, but we're also looking at video feedback as well.
Yeah, I think when I worked at Redline, I was starting to research more about the growth maturation. I have good conversations with James Bumps, who is at U.S. Soccer now, because I wanted to kind of use something to assess their growth maturation. We ended up going through Kamas-Rosh equation. So using the height, the weight, the height of the parents, and there was an Excel sheet that I could put all those things in, and it gives you a percent of predicted adult height. And based on some research and some numbers around what James told me, you could see kind of like, okay, 91% of the predicted adult height might be one of the really times where they're going to peak height velocity, so PHV, and then how that I use that to prioritize my programs in the gym, because I know when they go around the growth maturation, they get that awkwardness, and that's where the motor control comes in. And a lot of the times parents would come and they're just like, oh, my kid all of a sudden is so slow, it can't run. So educating the parents is huge too, because they need to know what happens in the kid's biological, process. So I used to just show the parents, especially, kind of like, this is the equation and this is why we do it, and kind of giving a little bit simple scientific education to the parents in regards to that. In terms of assessments, I'm huge on assessing everywhere, every time. I think assessments you can assess, especially of course, you need to get those numbers of power, strength, but I think most importantly, warm-ups are, for me, the best assessment time as a coach, to know how the athletes are moving. In the gym, we started recording how athletes are moving in the gym, and kind of going through the video and kind of solving the puzzle. So you get your athletic trainer, get the numbers from the athletic trainer, hip external rotation, internal rotation, lack of ankle mobility. And then you see the stuff in front of you, and you like make sense of everything. And then you see them on the warm up, you see them on the soccer drill or doing their sport, and you see all those compensations kind of come into play, and you can kind of like, okay, how do I solve that entire puzzle? I used a lot just marches and skips in warm-ups as an assessment of coordination and motor control with my players. So I would, the kids that would come in, we would go march and skips, and then different marches and skips, and then you can really see the improvement from day 1 to, day 30 or day 50. So that was a way for me to really kind of show the athlete too, the kid, and say, okay, look how much you're improving. And I think the visual feedback is huge, but understanding that assessments you can assess every time, and that's where the importance of the coach eye. The technology is great. I think nowadays, I think it's too much information sometimes, especially all the technology out there, that we get lost in it. And we get the numbers, and are we using the numbers? Are we actually affecting our training with our youth athletes with the numbers, or are we just using for using sake? So I think the coach eye is one of the most important tools, because you can really see the biggest improvements and all that. So so that's my take on it.
Good. I really want to move on, because again, we kind of preface this with, hey, we need to move beyond ACL injury prevention and the physical training stuff. But you did a great job giving some insights into, what we could call neck down training or physical training of youth females. But let's move on and let's really talk about the neck up part of coaching females. So can you share some important coaching elements, including how you connect and how you understand the psychological, the emotional, and the social world of teen and youth female athletes?
Yeah, sure. I love this topic, and after coaching for 8 years, I look back at the athletes who have been in it for the long haul, and it's the ones who I've developed that relationship with, and I've definitely gotten to know them beyond just who they are as a soccer player. I've gotten to know them as a student, as an artist, as a human, just as someone who has talents beyond just the game. And I like to teach that to the girls that I work with, because I know a lot of us can tie our identity to just sports. And I always tell them, like, be multidimensional. Like, you have so many talents, and there's so much that you're capable of. And I want them to realize that, because this is a long journey. It's a journey beyond just playing our sport and winning games and getting scholarships. And I always say there will be that one day when you play that last game. So who are you as a human, and what's your character, and who do you want to be? And I really think it's the coach's job, especially with females who generally have some self-doubt, especially in the teenage years, whether that's from stuff that's going on at home, or a coach not believing in them, just really showing them what their strengths are and bring out those gems. And it just brings me back to when I had a female coach growing up. She believed in me so much. And as a 13-year-old girl, like, I had a lot of blind spots. I had a lot going on in my life, and I was in a relationship where I was abused and doubted, and I needed those people in my life to pick me up and get me back on track, because when you're going through whatever it is, like, you are going to have those blind spots, and you're not going to know what you're capable of. So I'm grateful to have had that in my life to push me. So I think it's up to the coach to really encourage. And it always bothers me when coaches or parents say, oh, well, this female player, she just needs more confidence. We need to get her more training. We need to hire an extra skills coach. And that's not going to solve anything if they're being berated and they're not being supported and motivated as young women. So I just want to reiterate that And then one more thing that comes to mind is just listen. Sometimes they just need to talk, and not just about sports, but about their life, and just sit there and listen. If they're going through something, don't offer unwanted advice. Just let them spill their heart to you. And it reminds me, I had a college girl reach out to me, and I knew she was going through a lot of emotional abuse at her house, and she texted me and was like, I can't come into work out today. And I actually called her and I said, no, you're coming in today. Like, get in the gym. We're going to talk. And she was like, okay. So she came in, walked into my office, and just started crying. And her head just went in her hands, and she was saying how she felt lost and she didn't know what she wanted to do with her life. She was deciding if she should transfer schools or give up soccer. She just felt completely devastated. And then on top of that, there was a lot of issues going on at home and a lot of self-doubt there. And for that entire hour, just listen to her. And after it was over and she had told me everything that was going on, she said, wow, I feel so much better. Like, no one's ever listened to me like that before. And I'm so grateful to have shared that with you. And I felt so heard. And I told her, like, never feel sorry. Never feel sorry for saying how you feel, being a human, being lost, being scared, being anxious. And she just looked at me with this smile, and then it was this huge embrace. We like hugged, and we were actually supposed to deadlift max that day. And I asked her, I was like, do you still want to do this workout? Like, it's totally up to you. Like, where are you at? I know you're going through a lot. I know you just spilled your guts. What do you want to do? And she was like, let's freaking lift some weights. So we deadlift maxed, and she got the best number I've ever seen her get. And for someone who was just crying for an hour to do such a nervous system heavy lift and crush it was just, it was an amazing lesson for me as a coach. Not only to see the power of the weight room, and I think that's like the number one thing that teaches athletes to overcome discomfort and to see what they're capable of. So that was huge for me to see as a coach. And like Krista alluded to before, it's a part of the culture that girls lift heavy here, and that it should be celebrated. And all my girls say they feel empowered, and they feel like their mood's different after they lift. It's elevated. They feel energized. And that's something we have to continue to give to our female athletes, that relationship, the power of strength training, the power of movement and exercise, and just weave that into our culture. So yeah, I just wanted to share that story.
Yeah, good stuff, Erica. Which one of the two of you want to follow that one up?
Yeah, I can go. I could probably build off a little bit of what Erica was saying. So I help run a travel organization. So part of it is not just my relationship with the female athletes, but also managing like a dad coach's relationship with a 10U team or a 12U team, which obviously can be challenging. The experience that Erica gave is a little more challenging sometimes if it's a dad and a 12-year-old coach, and that relationship and what that looks like. And so one of the things we talk about a lot is what are we trying to build? What type of woman are we trying to build? We want strong women that are going to sit on a panel one day like this and feel empowered to speak to a crowd. And maybe it's not related to the sport. Maybe it's their business or job or whatever that is. And so, we talk about that a lot, so that all of our coaches sort of have in their minds what they're trying to promote, have in their minds of what they're trying to celebrate, to make sure that we are continuing to like build that type of woman. So I think one of the things I watch with our coaches is like, how do our male coaches interact with the other women around them? Forget the girls for a second, but if they have another woman on staff, how do they speak to that woman? How do they empower that woman? Because a lot of times it's just what the young female athletes are seeing portrayed to them about your value. So I think, Joe, I actually told you this story at the playground, but a lot of times, like, I run all of the hitting in our facility, and a lot of times someone will come into our facility and walk up to a random dad coach standing next to me and start asking him all of questions about hitting instead of asking me. And so what I like to watch for our female athletes is, like, how does that interaction unfold? Because they need to see that it's okay for me to be the one that is actually sort of like knows the information and is sought after. And so I think that's just a challenge for us. And I think a lot of times what is celebrated in sports is not always celebrated for females. So like celebration of success, and, you know, last year in a college game, someone, you know, there was a softball player that was bat flipping, and it became this humongous story just because like a female showing that level of confidence, I guess. I don't know, I would use confidence, but excitement, passion is more easily sort of dismissed or looked at as negatively sometimes than a male athlete doing that. So going back again to like our sort of dad coaches and things, a lot of times I'll hear people say, I like coaching girls because it's easier. They're more willing to want to do what the coach says, and that, you know, that process is easier. And I would just, you know, I hear it a lot, and maybe some of you on this call have said something like that. And I would just caution you to unpack that a little bit and understand what you're saying by saying that. It's easier to coach female athletes because they just go along, which is not going to lead them to a successful softball career, whatever, soccer career. It's also not going to lead them to a successful life if all they are is sort of willing to just go along with what people are telling them. So I think for me, my suggestion would be really try to define what type of woman you're trying to build. And once you have that definition in mind, like, everything should be around that. If you want a strong woman who's willing to, you know, speak for herself, own her career, all of those things, then every single aspect of your training, the coaches you hire, the interactions you have with the athletes should be promoting that definition. And so it's easier for you then, if you have that in mind, to realize when you're skewing away from that, or maybe letting some of your like biases or stereotypes come into it.
Evie, before you give your answer to this one, and I saw you writing some things down, so I know that you have some good thoughts here, but we have a question, and I think it's a really good question. And it deals with, how much does culture influence coaching? And the example is that this coach had a girl come to them crying because other 8 and 9-year-olds in their circle and on the previous team keep telling her she's fat and she's slow. And now she doesn't want to play goalie. And this coach says she's actually not fat or slow. So how do you deal with the culture of the team and deal with that sort of situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough as a young kid because there's a lot going on with bullying and friends groups. So I think the onus is absolutely on us as coaches to develop a culture of who these girls should be, and really ask them, who do you want to be as a human being? Do you want to be a person who brings others down, or do you want to be someone who brings others up? And I love how Kristin mentioned that all women should be celebrating other women, and male coaches should be celebrating women as well. So definitely leading by example and showing that behavior yourself as a coach, and then checking in with your players and asking them, hey, were you who you wanted to be today? Whether that's before practice or at the end of the week, and just really getting on them about it. And I always say my motto with my girls is work hard, be kind. And so take care of yourself as an athlete and human, but be kind to others and serve other people. And with my girls right now, we're all online and a lot of them don't know each other. And I said, hey, you got to reach out to someone you don't know this week. and let them know what they did well. And whether that's a strength drill or something they posted, comment on it, like it, uplift them. And it needs to be, you just need to find creative ways to build this strong community of women who are lifting each other up and celebrating each other for their accomplishments. And I think a lot of women are scared to play big. And I've written about this a lot. They're scared to reflect on how far they've come and what they've achieved. And they're just so quick to bring each other down. So I think encouraging your players to acknowledge their teammates for what they're doing as well and to celebrate it.
Yeah, I was just going to add, because we deal with organization, so also police the parents on things like that. The culture extends to the families that you're dealing with. And so we have written in our handbook, like, there's absolutely no speaking of other athletes. Do not ever come into a meeting with a coach and bring up someone else's child. And so just starting to get the education around, like, what are we doing here? What are our goals here? Because, you know, we're 11U and we're not pitching the best pitcher in this instant. Like, if the more we educate the families around the goals of what we're trying to accomplish, then likely that 8 and 9-year-old did not come up with that to tell that kid themselves. So something that has occurred in home life or whatever it is, to give them a suggestion to think that way or speak that way. And so bring the parents in as much as you can. I think Evie said, you said earlier about educating them around even the maturation process. And I think, like, the more you can educate them to understand what you're doing, the less you're going to run into those culture issues, because at the end of the day, we're only with these kids, you know, so much, and then they go home to their families, which is a much more big impact on their lives. And so you can't just think of the kids, you got to talk about the families that they're going home to as well.
Yeah, Evie, the floor is yours for the next 5 minutes on this topic related to, you know, psychosocial, emotional development of young females.
Yeah, I think it was amazing. Eric and Kristin, you guys hit the spot. I think as I was a player myself and played professional in college, and I had a really bad time with my confidence. When I was, you know, in my high school years, and I had all that pressure to, you know, I wanted to come to the US and play. And I had so much problems with my confidence that I would, like, cry after every single game, because as soon as I would get into the field, I would freeze. I could not play. And when I would train, I would be able to play. And I was lucky that my parents provided me with the resources, the sports psychologist to go through it. And sometimes even that was not enough. Like, for me, I still struggled a lot. I couldn't find a way to do it. So I think going back, and then all the athletes that I kind of came across, I think it's really important for all of us to show athletes about the big picture. There's a bigger picture than the sport, I think. And that's the moral, the work ethic, all that stuff that you can guide them through it. It's not just tunnel vision to that sport, not that tunnel vision to that just being successful in the sport. And I think it's really important to guide them through that, because a lot of the times it's just bigger than soccer. It's bigger than the sport itself. It's kind of how you create that resiliency through your athletes since a young age to deal with all those problems and have the resources to deal with all those things, because they know that there's something bigger than that. And I think kind of guiding them through what brings the fire in you. You know, what is exactly that fuels you, that motivates you? And I think that's a reflection that I do it every day. It's a self-reflection. It's really important to kind of start that early with young kids, you know, because when you start showing them that they're powerful and they can do what they want to do, because that's what motivates them, then you create that resiliency that they can deal with all those 8, 9 years old telling them, oh, you can't do it because you're slow and fast. But they know now that it's not. No, it's what fuels me, and I'm gonna, I'm gonna be better from it. Like, I think it's really important that resiliency is extremely important. So that's something that I try to talk to my athletes a lot. With my female athletes especially, I know that with boys, like, they are afraid to show their vulnerability a lot, because they think that they're weak if they show that. So I feel like girls are more kind of, they're not afraid to show that vulnerability a lot. So it's just kind of putting things into perspective to them, and it's like, I had this young athlete, female athlete, and she was kind of deciding on, it was early college days for her. She was going to college, and she was just confused about everything, and she had so much going on, and her parents were pressuring her, so just having the time to sit down and put things into perspective for that person. And it's like, okay, what is it important to you? Because sometimes there's so many people talking in their heads that they get so lost that they're like, I don't know who I'm gonna follow the advice. And what do you want? What are you motivated? What brings the fire in you? And then from there, can you kind of help them along the way to guide them and give them resources and all that. So I think that's for me it was huge when I was struggling with that, because I had those reflections and I had people that kind of made me reflect those things, and I knew that I wanted to be more than that. I didn't want to be just a good and a very good soccer player. I wanted to be the strong woman that I can move from Brazil, leaving all my family and knowing that this was my mission, and I'm not gonna give up that easily. So everybody has their story. Everybody has something that kind of brings them to be a strong person, a strong woman, a strong, So it's our job is to kind of guide them through that and celebrate the small victories and making sure they achieve that every day and celebrate.
Yeah, great. We're going to wrap up here. You three crushed it. I knew that you would. This has been a great session, a lot of good feedback already from people. As we leave, I want to know one thing that everybody, including myself, remember how I started this. I'm uncomfortable coaching young female athletes. Part of it's just I haven't that much. One thing that everybody needs to know about coaching girls, and where can people get in contact with you if they have other questions?
Sure. The thing I'd say is that we're in the human business, and it's more about the sport itself. And for me, it pumps me up to see girls I worked with for many years since they were age 10, and they're now out of college, and they're doing what they love, even if it's not soccer, but they're finding joy and meaning in their lives, and they're happy, and they're strong, resilient women. And especially during this time, I've seen them blossom through chaos and adversity. And for me, I don't think sports teach that. Everyone's like, oh, well, sports teach you how to overcome adversity. And I don't think that's true. I think the coach teaches you how to overcome adversity. So really building a resilient human for life is critical for me. And you guys can find me at www.ericasuter.com and Fit Soccer Queen on Twitter.
Yeah, Erica, that last point you made there is almost word for word what Andy Ryland said on Thursday as well about character development, because we always talk about, if you play sports, that builds character. But it's not the sport. You're exactly right. It's the coach and that support system around them that helps build and develop it.
Yeah, I'm gonna steal. I've never used the words Evie used, but they are perfect of what brings the fire in you. I think my take home for this generation of athlete, especially who's so defined by sports that sometimes it overwhelms them. I would say like my biggest takeaway, forget female or male, is just finding out what motivates your athletes, who they are as people, and letting that then, you know, dictate your relationship with them going forward, and how you connect with them, because it's going to be very important in time like this when their sport gets taken away from them, or, you know, when they go on in life, that they understand how that sort of translates across both sport and everything else they do. Sorry, you can find me on Twitter, Krista_Stoker. I just forgot. I'm going to drop in the chat my email. And then I'm on Twitter, Krista_Stoker. So.
Yeah, I think for me, I always tell, you know, the young coaches that reach out and kind of like people that are just starting in this business and in the process of coaching youth and coaching players, I think really important to kind of guide your player to develop a roadmap, and that's where it's kind of a good reflection. So where you are right now and where you want to be, and understand that that road is going to be, it's not going to be what you really want. It's specific. It's going to be full of turns, and you know, sometimes you have to take 5 steps back to kind of go forward, and kind of guiding that through with your athletes, and letting them know everything's a process, and everything, you got to be patient, and whatever, and if that's a goal, and to be successful in their sport, to be a better, strong female, strong woman, strong person, I think it all comes down to, okay, where you are right now, where you want to be, and then can you understand that this road can take a bunch of different routes. Sometimes it's not going to be the one that you want, but you're going to be stronger from it. So understanding that process, it's a process, and you just got to be patient. I'll write my email, but Twitter, Evie Casagrande, or Instagram, or email, I'll put it right here. It was a pleasure. It's been amazing learning experience. I took so many notes from what Kristin, Eric, and Joe, the discussions that you're opening. It's really good.
Yeah, so in terms of taking notes, again, this has been recorded. It will be posted with all of our other LTAD chats and the Twitter chats at the link that I left in the chat box. I want to thank each of you for being on the panel today. Somebody dropped a note like, this has gone by so quick, and it really has. Very good information here. I'm sure people are going to go back, rewatch it, but again, the key is to take stuff away and implement it. And that's kind of what this is about, as well as sharing experiences and insights into being able to implement these into our, you know, daily and weekly practices of working with young people and people of all ages and abilities. So upcoming episodes of the LTAD Chat Live next Saturday, May 2nd, we are going to discuss training load in youth athletes. We have a panel that includes Professor Ben Jones from Leeds Beckett University, Jay Salter, David Johnson, and Andy Bruce, all who have real extensive experience and have conducted research in this area of training load assessment and training load management in youth athletes. And then the week of Monday, May 4 through May 8, we're going to be doing our Twitter chat. We're going to do a little bit different this time. We're going to drop one question every day, because we know, like, we're getting great worldwide participation now. So when we set the time at 9 p.m. Eastern, you know, folks on the other side of the pond, they're sleeping, so they can't participate live. So what we're going to do that week, we're going to give it a go. We're going to try to drop we are going to drop one question every day, so you can respond to it and then interact with others. The topic is dealing with sport parents. And I'm saying dealing kind of sarcastically, because the person who's going to actually be the guest host is the individual who runs the group called Working with Parents in Sports. But oftentimes we say that, don't we? How do you deal with parents? And we need to think differently on that. We need to work with them. And then May 9th, myself and my colleagues, my great colleagues and friends, Tony Moreno and Rick Howard, we're going to take over the LTADchat Live. And we're going to talk about this event, this grassroots, no frills event workshop that we do locally to educate individuals on long-term athletic development, or whatever you want to call it. Fitness across the lifespan, physical activity across the lifespan, physical literacy, but we educate people on it. But more importantly, we give them the tools to go into their communities to implement these frameworks and models. So we're going to talk about that, and then talk about some things that we have ongoing right now, and kind of what our vision is and what the future may look like in this space. So that's May 9th. Thanks again for everybody for being here. Have a great day, have a great weekend, and hopefully we'll see you next Saturday.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you.
Thanks,
Rick.
everybody.
Thanks,
Great.
Erica. Thank you.
Great job, ladies. Very nice.
Very good. Thank you.